Welcome to Shadow Fable. Don't forget to subscribe. A face stared back at us from the photograph, pale and silent among our smiles, but none of us had ever seen him before. The reunion had been a long time coming, nearly 15 years in the making. Sarah had insisted, convincing her husband Mark and the extended family that gathering at the old Victorian estate would bring closure to a challenging year. The house stood grandly atop a gentle rise in Vermont, its sprawling grounds now lushly green, freshly scented by the rain. It was a home that had welcomed generations of laughter, tears, and whispered secrets. The family trickled in slowly, cousins and aunts exchanging hugs and updates, children darting through hallways and rooms, chasing echoes and memories alike. Soon, the halls buzzed with warm voices, gentle laughter, and the clink of glasses. Everything felt just as Sarah had imagined, perfectly nostalgic, deeply comforting. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting soft, colorful patterns across the hardwood floors. It was in this golden hour that the family gathered for the traditional group photograph beneath the old oak tree at the property's heart. 30 smiling faces, capturing generations. The moment felt timeless, a memory etched forever. Later that evening, as dusk deepened into velvet darkness and soft lamplight filled the drawing room, Sarah's niece Emily handed around her camera, sharing the photo with each family member. It was Mark who first noticed something amiss. He leaned closer, brows knitted in confusion, and passed the camera to Sarah without a word. Her eyes scanned each familiar face, her smile fading as she reached the edge of the photo. There, half hidden in shadow, was an elderly man, gray-haired, thin-faced, eyes distant and melancholy. "Who's this?" Sarah asked softly, her voice tight. One by one, the family members studied the image, whispers and confusion spreading through the room. No one recognized him. No one remembered seeing him. It was as if he had appeared solely for the photograph, like a ghost slipping silently into the frame. Unease settled quietly over the gathering, dampening spirits and pulling at the corners of their minds. Sarah watched her family with growing discomfort, recognizing a quiet, simmering dread in their eyes. She assured them it must have been a mistake. A neighbor who had wandered onto the grounds, perhaps. But even as she spoke, the words felt hollow, unconvincing. Sleep proved elusive that night. The family retired to bedrooms scattered across the grand old house, but dreams were replaced by quiet whispers behind closed doors, restless shifting in creaking beds, and the soft padding of feet in empty hallways. Sarah rose just after dawn, her nerves brittle with exhaustion. She drifted to the kitchen, hoping coffee and solitude might quiet her unsettled mind. But the kitchen offered no peace. An old photo album lay open on the table, its worn pages brittle and yellowed with age. Her fingertips brushed the edge of a photograph, her breath catching as she turned the album fully into the lamplight. There he was again, the stranger from yesterday's photograph. He appeared younger here, dressed in a suit and tie, standing solemnly among her grandparents and distant relatives. Beneath the picture, a faded inscription read, "Family Reunion, 1963. Sarah's heart raced. Who was this man, and why did no one remember him? Determined, she began quietly digging through old boxes and files stored away in forgotten corners of the house. Hours slipped by unnoticed until at last, buried within a cedar chest in the attic, she found a weathered envelope bearing the faded name, Henry Warden. Inside, yellowed newspaper clippings detailed the mysterious disappearance of Henry Warden in the late summer of 1964, right after that same reunion. He had simply vanished without a trace, never to be spoken of again, as if erased from memory itself. Sarah stared at the photographs accompanying the articles, her pulse drumming. The same sad, distant eyes gazed back at her. Why had her family never spoken of this tragedy? What else had they hidden? As the family rose for breakfast, Sarah gently confronted her parents and relatives, showing them the old clippings and photographs. The response chilled her. Each face went pale, their eyes glazed with a distant confusion, as though trying to recall a forgotten dream. They denied any knowledge of Henry, even while clearly unsettled by his name. It was as though an invisible hand had wiped him clean from their memories. Over the next days, tension coiled itself more tightly around them. Arguments erupted over small things, laughter ceased to fill the house. Family members began leaving earlier than planned, each departure tinged with an uncomfortable urgency. The estate grew emptier, yet no one dared discuss why, as though speaking aloud might give shape to the unnamed dread each felt. Mark, increasingly worried about Sarah's obsession, pleaded gently for her to let it rest, but she couldn't. Sleep evaded her. Shadows deepened around her eyes, and she felt Henry's presence pressing ever closer, whispering quietly just beyond hearing, beckoning her to understand. Finally, Sarah returned once more to the attic, desperate for answers. She felt drawn to the cedar chest again, compelled by an urgency she could neither explain nor resist. As she opened it once more, she spotted something she had previously missed: a slender diary hidden beneath layers of old linens. Hands trembling, Sarah turned its pages. The neat handwriting belonged unmistakably to Henry Warden. Each page filled with detailed, emotional entries, describing feelings of alienation, whispered arguments behind closed doors, and subtle rejections by family who refused to acknowledge him. The entries grew darker, lonelier, culminating in one final haunting line: "If they won't acknowledge me in life, perhaps they'll never forget me in death." Her stomach churned. She needed fresh air, space to think clearly. Stepping onto the wide front porch, she inhaled deeply, hoping to calm the storm within. Yet, as twilight settled once more, the figure she'd hoped never to see again stood silently beneath the old oak tree, watching her. Henry Warden's pale eyes glistened with quiet accusation. Sarah's heart seized painfully as she stared back, unable to move or speak. Slowly, Henry turned toward the woods behind the house, beckoning her with a quiet sadness, vanishing into the gathering shadows. Drawn by some irresistible force, Sarah followed him into the dim, whispering woods, heart hammering in her chest. The air grew colder, darker, sounds muted by a weighty silence. She walked blindly, following glimpses of his ghostly form until she reached an overgrown clearing deep within the forest. Henry stood before a shallow depression in the earth. He pointed downward, his expression mournful, pleading. Hesitantly, Sarah knelt and dug her fingers into the soil. Within moments, she uncovered bones, yellowed and brittle with age, a secret long buried, a crime long forgotten. Then it struck her, a horrifying realization that tightened like a noose around her heart. The family knew, perhaps they had always known. Henry hadn't simply vanished. He'd been quietly erased, buried and hidden away by the very people she loved and trusted most. She staggered back, eyes wide with horror. Henry's apparition faded slowly, a quiet, almost peaceful resignation in his gaze, leaving Sarah alone with her terrible truth. Returning to the empty house, Sarah found only silence awaiting her. The family had gone, fleeing their collective guilt or memory, leaving her alone with the legacy they refused to acknowledge. Years later, Sarah still lives in that old Victorian house, Visitors to the town speak of seeing her sometimes, standing silently beneath the oak tree, staring blankly at the woods beyond, as though waiting for someone who would never return. But those who visit rarely come back a second time. They tell of an unsettling feeling, whispers drifting through the halls, shadows at the corners of their vision, and one strange detail that always chills their bones. In the photographs taken there, among the smiling visitors, an elderly man appears, always silent, always watching. They say he's waiting, patiently, for someone else to remember.